Hi everyone, this is Quinn Arnold. I'm a planner at Arnold and Moat Wealth Management. Welcome to our monthly webinar. There are two ways that you can interact with us today if you have any questions about the content. First off, you could feel free to leave a comment in YouTube or send us an email here at Arnold and Moat. We are happy to see any questions or concerns that you have as you view the webinar this month. Also, a reminder that we gather these topics from client questions and concerns. So if there's a topic you'd like to see us address in more detail in a webinar, please let us know. That's how we can respond with some more detail and provide a, kind of a good way to think about a topic in a little bit longer of a form. All right, let's jump into this month's webinar. We're going to be talking about the role of an estate executor. If you've ever wondered what that entails, we'll hopefully get into some details that provide a little bit more light on this important estate planning topic. Okay, so what or who is an executor? And it's a who. It's a person that's named in the will. If a person does not have a will when they die, or if there's not a living person who was named as executor, which sometimes happens with old wills, the court will appoint a person to function as an executor. Every estate needs somebody to do this job. The executor may or may not be a beneficiary of the estate. It doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily receive anything from the person who passed away, either assets or some kind of token of appreciation. It's also important to know that you could be compensated as an executor. There are some guidelines around this. Sometimes an estate requires a lot of work to do the executor job, so it's not out of line to expect in some cases that you may be compensated for this role, meaning you might be paid. An executor is similar to a trustee. It's a little bit different because a trustee, for one, only functions for a trust, and a trust is not a person that dies. And so in the case of an executor, you are kind of the last person dealing with the either physical or financial or otherwise digital assets of a person who has passed away. So, but the executor does function very similarly to what a trustee sometimes does. And as we're going through this month on the webinar, I want you to understand that I am not an attorney. We're not making recommendations as legal advice in this webinar. So you may want to consider hiring an attorney for the case of helping out the executor. That is what estate attorneys do. They help out with settling some of these affairs that executors are tasked with. You do have to pay the attorney. Usually it's a percentage of the estate that may be negotiable, but sometimes there are flat fees that you pay to help settle estate executor work. But in any case, that can be money that's very well spent having a professional attorney who knows what they're doing to kind of guide you through this process. The attorney can do some things, but the executor still has to play a role in this whole endeavor. Okay, so public service announcement. I even put a little flash there in terms of we think that people ought to talk more candidly and in more detail with the person that they want to have as their executor before the person dies. So this is an important role. There's a lot of responsibility to it. You ought to know about this role if you are being tasked as an executor. It shouldn't come as a surprise to you when somebody passes away. And unfortunately, that does happen. So it's really important if you are making your own estate documents, creating a will, and thinking through this whole process that you talk with the person who you want to have as your executor. It's also important if you are named as an executor, keep in mind that this is, it's an honor to be tasked with this. It is the last thing that has to be done for a person after they pass away, to sign off on all of these things as the executor. But it is not an inconsequential job. It's definitely requires some amount of work. So we're going to be sharing at the end of this webinar a link to an estate administration checklist that we think is pretty helpful. It's put on, or that checklist was developed by a service called wealth.com, which deals with estate planning documents. If you have any questions about really the nitty-gritty of what an executor is, I would encourage you to review that list and then answer the question, do these sound like tasks that you are up for and that you can handle? If the answer is no, you need to talk soon with the person who has tasked you as their executor and see if there can be a new person appointed. If they sound like manageable tasks, even if you're not entirely sure what all of it means, that is good. That means you're going to be a good executor. And then some of the first steps that we encourage people as they're talking with, their parent or their loved one or the person that they're going to function as the executor for is just to find out, where does your loved one keep documents, keep their will, keep online passwords or account information? Is there a folder that they have in their house in a filing cabinet? Is it kept in a desk somewhere? Is it kept in a safe deposit box at a bank that you need to know about? Those are all important things to iron out while the person is capable of telling you that, so that you're not struggling after they have passed away and are no longer a resource for that. So this is our public service announcement. We see enough working with clients of people that struggle with the executor role. It can be difficult, so we encourage you to think about this up front. Okay, so let's now get into what are the actual first steps of being an executor, and what are some of the notification things that you need to be aware of. So one of the first steps that you should think about is, do you need to hire an attorney? And this is a judgment call. It's possible to do the administration of an estate without an attorney. There's nothing that the executor requires once they are properly noted as the executor. There's nothing that the executor requires that an attorney has to do. Our legal system is set up so that an executor can settle almost all of these things on their own. Now, an attorney will do this over and over throughout the year and be an expert at it. So it is not only faster and easier for an attorney, they may help you avoid some mistakes along the way just based on things that they see from day to day. So that's an important consideration. The attorney's fees are paid by the estate, so meaning by the person who passed away those assets. As an executor, you should not have to pay for the attorney to assist you. That's typically paid by the estate. Small estates are a definition, or that's a thing. A small estate means a limited amount of assets, and so those can avoid the probate process, and you may not need an attorney for that. We're in the state of Iowa, and so Iowa has what's called a small estate affidavit process. This is written into the Iowa Legal Code. It tells you what the size of an estate is. Currently, that size is $50,000 in assets or less. So if you have more assets than that, you can't use this affidavit process. But if you have, and if you have certain kinds of assets, you can't do that either. So there's a process defined for each state, whether or not this is allowed, what the rules are. But that's something to keep in mind too, because if you're named as an executor for a person with limited assets, this may be something that you want to consider, because it is still paperwork to fill out, but is simpler than going through the typical probate process. So keep that in mind if your loved one had limited assets, and it might be easier to close out their estate that way. Okay, so consider hiring an attorney. The next step is for you to settle up on funeral expenses. So this is, typically working with a funeral home. This It may have been something that the person who passed away arranged ahead of time. Sometimes, older people will even prepay their funeral expenses, so there may be limited expenses here. But this is just one thing that you'll want to keep in mind getting started is to think about which of these expenses are you going to pay for? Is the family of the deceased person paying for anything in particular? Typically, the executor can pay for these expenses as part of the estate of the person who has passed away. And keep in mind all along that as you are the executor, you get to make the decisions about which things are paid for by the estate, that is, by the assets of the person who died. The next step that's very important is to get certified death certificates. These usually come from the funeral home. If you've been working with a funeral home for your loved one who passed away, this will be typically provided by the funeral director maybe a couple days after the person has died. It is important to get certified death certificates. They'll usually ask you how many you want. There may be a nominal fee for those, like $25 for each one. You'll want, we typically tell people 4 or 5 of those. Usually financial institutions, financial institutions are a mix on how they deal with this. Sometimes they want just to scan the certified copy and they'll give it back to you. Others want to keep it. This, it tells them that this is officially the document that the person has died, which is what they need. So you'll need to retrieve those or get those as the executor, or get them from the family. And then the next first step, so kind of the beginning of or the end of the beginning steps is to open probate and receive a letter of testamentary. And this probate is a word that strikes fear into some people's hearts. It shouldn't. It is just a legal process that the states have put into effect to settle up the notification and settlement of assets for a person who has died. So that's all it is. It just means that there's an official process that involves the court system and involves our counties in making sure that everything is settled according to the rules that the state has in place for somebody when they die. So probate can sometimes drag on. Typically, we tell people to expect from 6 months to a year for the probate process to be in place. If the person who died had a chance to plan ahead and make things as simple as possible, it's very possible that probate can be closed within that 6 months. That's an official process that goes through the court. So don't be afraid of what probate means. It just means that this is the process that the state and the county are using for settling everything. A letter of testamentary is provided by the courts to indicate that you are the executor, so that you are in fact the legal person representing the estate of this person who has died, and then that the person has died and that this is now a process that's going into effect through the probate process. So that's what that means. You will typically need that letter from the court to tell financial institutions or if you're selling a house or something like that, you're going to need that to indicate that you are acting as the executor, that you have those legal rights. All right. Okay, so then we're going to talk about documents. How do you organize all of this stuff? This is a challenge. We put it on one slide. This is not a one and done kind of thing. This is where the real meat of being an executor is. It can be the most difficult part. So this will require a great deal of patience typically, unless the person who died was just extremely organized and perhaps had some sense that they would be dying and took care of a lot of these things. For most people, when they die, there's going to be some amount of work for the executor going through these steps. So we suggest that you begin by gathering things. You're going to want utility bills. If they're living in an apartment or in a home, you'll want to see if they had a credit card, if there are bills that you can find for that for credit cards that are open. you'll want to find their rent, what's being paid for rent. If they're in a nursing home or a retirement community, that's pretty easy to track down with the community. If they're living in a home and they still have a mortgage, you'll want to figure that out. Um, you'll want to, if they are living in a home or in a house, you'll want to figure out things like property taxes. When are those due? When was the last time they were paid? And then a big part is finding the bank and investment accounts. If you are fortunate and you've planned ahead with the person who's passed away, they'll have a list of these things so that you don't have to make the list on your own. Then after you've gathered these things, and so there could be additional things too. There's going to be all sorts of stuff that you need to pull together. But the next step then is to start notifying institutions. So if the person had life insurance still, you'll want to work with the life insurance company. This is what life insurance companies do, so they will know exactly how to take you through this process. You'll also want to notify the Social Security Administration. There are funeral homes that will do this for you. They often do this as they report the death as part of the processes with the county of reporting the death of an individual. So often Social Security is notified, but if they've not done that, you'll want to find that out and let the Social Security Administration know. If the person served in the military, you'll want to let the Veterans Administration know. You'll also want to notify creditors, so that could be a credit card, especially a mortgage company, and make those things clear that the person has passed away. They will start asking for documentation. So this is where those certified death certificates or the letter of testamentary is important for you to have that. Okay, then start organizing. You may want to keep a spreadsheet on your computer. You may want to just keep written notes of this. Put together a list of the expenses the person had or still has outstanding, any income streams that are coming in. These are things like pensions, Social Security checks, the last time that was paid, if they have an annuity that's being paid. Make a list of all of their property. So if they still have real estate, so if they still own a house, that you're going to want to pay special attention to that. If they have a car, if there are any investment accounts, any cash that's in the person's home, so this could be cash that they kept somewhere in there. This is all your job as the executor to organize this inventory. So keep track of everything. It's very important to keep good notes, to write everything down. And then in terms of doing at this stage, you may want to consider things like when are the next bills due? Can you start closing accounts like credit card accounts? Eventually, you'll start transferring property to the heirs and file a final tax return. The transferring property to the heirs will sometimes need to wait. So this may need to wait through the probate process. It may also need to wait as you liquidate things. So if there's an investment account that has assets in it, if if the job is to get that cash out to children or grandchildren or something like that, this may need to happen over the course of several weeks. If it's personal property, something in the home, and if the person's will had a list of things that they want to give to family members or to friends, you can start processing that. Typically, we suggest waiting until probate is done. But if it's things that are truly like mementos, personal property, say pictures, scrapbooks, things that have been noted in the will that don't have a lot of financial value, but that are earmarked for somebody as a family or friend, that's part of this process too. Okay, then we want to take one kind of side detour here because we work with a lot of clients who have their investment accounts at Charles Schwab. We just want to talk a little bit about what happens to those investment accounts. This is very true of the other custodians. The other custodians are organizations like Fidelity, Vanguard, E-Trade. they will all have some kind of process for dealing with an account holder who has died. Schwab has a very well-defined process, and they're going to need the death certificate, certified death certificate, and then the whole process moves forward, kind of dependent on what the accounts were that the person had at Schwab before they died. If they are individual retirement accounts, IRAs, whether traditional or Roth, those will almost always, at least for the clients that we work with, have beneficiary designations. It means that there are people in that person's life that were designated to receive this IRA. We will usually, Arnold and Moat will usually help you open the inherited IRAs with Schwab's assistance. And then there are specific rules for how you withdraw money from those accounts and what the tax implications are. So that's something that we do working with Schwab to help out for family and friends of the deceased when it's an IRA. Brokerage accounts can have beneficiary designations, so these are after-tax investment accounts. Um, we can help you with the transfer of that account, or if they're opening a new account at Schwab to process this. It works somewhat like an IRA. The rules for withdrawals are different, though. It's simpler, and so we can talk you through that. And Schwab has a pretty straightforward process for moving that through. If the person who passed away had a living trust account, then we'll help you gather that trust information. And then, if applicable, we'll open a new account for the trust beneficiaries or change the titling on the account. That's very specific to what the trust actually entails. So what's the time frame on all of this? Usually it takes a couple of weeks if everything's in order. We try to make sure that's all kind of clean for our clients so that this is not a difficult process after somebody has passed away. And these things do not require probate typically. That's not always true, but usually for things like IRAs, we're not waiting on the probate process. This is what we would say non-probatable, or it bypasses probate. And that's an advantage in that things can move a little faster. So that's an important thing for you to know as the executor, is that typically Charles Schwab accounts or a lot of other investment accounts can just move through to the beneficiaries without probate. Okay, so we've covered a lot, but guess what? We've actually only scratched the tip of the iceberg, to mix metaphors here, in terms of all of the things that somebody as an executor may have to do. These were just the general outlines. We encourage you to go to our website at arnoldmoatwealthmanagement.com/executor. There we have a couple of resources listed, as well as this recording. So that's /executor. There are 3 things out there. There's the estate administration checklist from wealth.com. That's several pages. It gives some good context and things for you to know as the administrator. Remember, the executor is the primary administrator of all of this. We also have 2 other kind of flow charts or checklists that you can use. Both are broader than just what executors have to do. So they're just what issues should you consider if your spouse passes away or if your parent passes away. 2 common things that we see with our clients. And so this gets into some other things beyond estate settlement. There's, related to what to do for the family and just some other topics that are not solely the executor's responsibility. So please consider using those resources and reaching out if you do have questions. It's obviously a stressful time in life for a lot of people when somebody passes away. Usually the executor is somebody close to the person who has died. And so we fully understand this can be a lot to deal with during those immediate days after somebody's passing. So we hope that this is of service to you as you're thinking about the executor role, and encourage you to know more about it and to ask some questions of the person who you may be serving as an executor for, so that can be done as smoothly as possible. With that, encourage you to send any questions our way, and thank you for attending the webinar.